Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. Hello, everyone.
So you've been in Silicon Valley as a VC. You've run DARPA. So I'm sure you know this phrase that, AI is anything that a computer cannot yet do.
Oh yeah.
So I'm wondering
until it can, and then we're like, oh yeah, that's how the world works.
Exactly. But if AI is something a computer can't yet do, how do you regulate that? It's this nebulous thing that I don't think anybody quite can even explain.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's not the question we started out with. So let me tell you the story. I showed up at the White House as the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, which means I'm the President's Science and Technology Advisor. And so that's all of science and technology and innovation. But I started in October of 2022, and in November of 2022, we all know what happened, which is ChatGPT came into the world. And AI, of course, had been in everyone's lives already, right? But you didn't know that it was AI if you got a price on an airline ticket that looked different than someone else's, or you didn't know if it was AI that was the reason your loan got approved or disapproved. But all of a sudden, if you're interacting with chatbots and image generators, you know it's AI. And so it really captured the public imagination, and it became a huge priority for the president and the vice president, and hijacked my entire first year. But the question that we were asking, the work we were doing, the president started by saying, look, this is the most consequential technology of our times. We know how people use powerful technologies. They use them for good and for ill. And so our job, we have always approached this job as managing AI's risks so that we can seize its benefits. And what that means today, when we talk about AI today, the particular generation of AI that we are in is this machine learning generation, where people build compute systems that they train on a lot of data, and then they use them to make statistical predictions. And because we're in the information age and there are an almost infinite variety of different kinds of data, the applications of AI systems are just phenomenally broad, and therefore the implications are broad. And that was the frame for all the work that we got done in the last year.
Yeah. So I recently interviewed DeepMind co-founder Shane Legg, and he said something I thought he said, if anyone's going to get to AGI first, artificial general intelligence, it might be the NSA. They have all this compute power, and they have all the data in the world, more data than anybody. And I think he was saying that in not in a good way, like it wouldn't be a good thing. But I thought about it, and I'm like, you've been on the government side, you've been serving for a long time, and pushing technology forward. I mean, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world if the government were to be on the cutting edge and one step ahead of the private sector on this particular type of technology. What do you think about that? I mean, should we be doing that?
I don't think we're having a very smart conversation about this yet, because I think what the conversation has been about how do you keep throwing more compute and data, specifically at large language models in particular.
Sure.
And that is an interesting question. Mm-hmm. I'm actually not even sure it's the most interesting question if what you care about is how does it affect people in society and the country and global competition. And I think we need to make sure we're approaching this well. Let me just start with one example of why I think there's a disconnect. A lot of the conversation is about the technology and how complex and opaque it is and how powerful it is. But actually, every single thing that we want to use AI to do in the world, or everything that we are fearful will happen as people use AI in the world, this is about what human beings are doing. It's humans that are choosing what kinds of systems to build. It's humans that choose the training data. A lot of that training data is about human beings. And then it's humans that decide what applications to use these systems for. And then if you're talking about generative AI, it's actually what comes out of a generative AI system. It reflects the interaction between this machine that was built and trained by humans and the individual who's using it. And so I think there are a lot of interesting conversations to be had about AI. Some of them are philosophical conversations. Some of them are like, I feel like I'm in a freshman dorm room at 2 in the morning kind of conversations. Those should definitely go on. But if we're going to make smart policy, and if we're going to learn how to build and use AI in ways that are powerful and effective, but constructive and safe, then I think you really have to focus not just on the technology, but on what people and corporations are doing. And that's how we have approached the work we've done to start it on the right track for both getting it right and making it safe and responsible, but then using it to go do big things.
Yeah. I want to just ask one question about TikTok, and I know this is not your specific area, but you probably know Vinod Khosla, the venture capitalist,
I know
and
Vinod, yeah.
he's come out against against TikTok. He's for the ban, essentially, quote unquote ban, and a lot of people, and I think for a lot, he's become sort of a China hawk, and I think there's a contingent in Silicon Valley that's sort of surprised by that as one of the fathers of open source and technology and everything. I just wonder if there's, and you've been on the side again of with DARPA of pushing the U.S. forward in technology. Is TikTok? Do you think this stuff that we're doing with TikTok is actually just sort of a fool's errand and trying to stop another country from developing technology instead of ourselves developing it?
Okay, so you just asked about 12 questions, so let me unravel that. So let's pull the TikTok thread for a moment since it's timely. So what's happening on TikTok specifically, this is one part of a larger privacy landscape. We know there are huge privacy issues, that our privacy has eroded in this information era and the social media era. It's happened gradually, but we've come to a place that there are some quite deep privacy concerns. It's an area where President Biden has taken action, but has also called on Congress for strong bipartisan legislation. We're hopeful that that's now going to move. Hopeful that will happen. The big issue for TikTok from a national security perspective is about the vast amount of information that platform is able to collect about people, and specifically the fact that because of its ownership, there's a direct line to the People's Republic of China. Which is, in the geopolitics of today, that is a deeply concerning issue. So it is a national security issue. The president has called for divestment. He has not called for a ban. He's called for divestment. And that's that story, and I think that's one piece of the landscape. I think this broader question, you also mentioned open source. You've talked about all the different ways that you can use technology. I want to disagree with the premise of this session. I think the title that you gave this session is how people tend to think about it, is you can either go fast and really innovate and do big, powerful things, or you can be safe. And I think that's actually completely wrong, because in fact, I think we're at a moment with artificial intelligence where if we don't figure out how to get it right and be able to assess what AI systems do, companies won't have the trust of consumers and businesses that need to use it. And as a society, people will revert to being concerned and fearful about AI rather than seeing it as something that we have been able to manage and then use to go forward. And so I'm actually not for balancing, but actually going hard at dealing with the risks and getting that right, and then going equally hard to use it. And a lot of the conversation about using it is about business companies and what the market's going to do. And I think that's super interesting. I'm really excited to see. And we're seeing all kinds of startups. We're seeing all kinds of new applications. And I know from my private sector life that some of those will succeed and thrive and others will not. And that's great. I want to see what comes out of that. I'm really interested in the seat I'm in right now. We've done a lot of work. The president made enormous progress last year in getting AI risks managed. We're on the right track. We've got a lot more work to do. But with the voluntary commitments, the executive order that he put out, the work we've done globally, including it with the United Nations General Assembly, working with Congress on a bipartisan basis, we've made a serious start and a good start on managing the risks. What comes after that is how do we use it not just for market and business purposes, but how do we start using AI in powerful ways for the country's purposes? And so think about what the promise of AI for weather forecasting and for materials design to create new opportunities for our industries. Think about how we deliver government services or how we change health outcomes. We all know how tantalizing those prospects are, but I think in my view, we have to go as hard at using it to do the country's work as we have gone after dealing with it and managing its risks.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things people say when they criticize this regulatory idea is that AI's this broad thing. There are a lot of these issues that you talk about, like in the blueprint for AI, like bias, and there are already laws against using algorithms to discriminate against people, right? There are already existing regulations. So if you try to take on AI broadly, you kind of risk, I guess, creating more fear, but maybe sweeping up some of the good, with the bad.
Yeah, and that's exactly why if you go look at what the president signed off on in his executive order, the reason it is so bulky is because it's very clear that AI is a broad technology, and depending on the applications and uses, there are very different issues. Sometimes there are safety and security issues, sometimes there are issues of embedding bias and discrimination, sometimes there are issues of privacy, sometimes there are issues about how it will disrupt work and the economy, and or competition issues, and all of those have to be handled. And very much to your point, I think this is exactly right. So many of the things that people are concerned about AI enabling or people using AI to do happen to be illegal already, but that becomes, as a practical matter, that becomes how do we regulate and enforce against it. I'll give you a great example. I think everyone's familiar with these systems that filter resumes, right? So you get a gajillion resumes. Is there a simple way to filter them? Well, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission exists to make sure that discrimination doesn't happen in hiring, but when resumes are getting filtered by a machine, how do you even know that's embedding bias? There's an infamous story of a company that trained a model on current resumes of employees, used it to filter new resumes, and quickly found that no women were getting through the filter. So they realized they had a problem and they fixed it. But how does a regulatory agency know and then enforce against the exacerbation of these harms? That's an example of the kind of thing that we now have to deal with.
Of course, they do that with humans, and you can't know why humans are discriminated either. But I want to, before we run out of...
But it's a scale issue with AI, right? Like the scale at which, that's why AI is so powerful, is it allows you to do things at scale. It better be good things you're doing.
Maybe we could have time for one more thing, because I think this is really important. The National AI Resource Pilot Program, which we haven't seen the fruits of that yet, right? Where scientists and startups can get publicly funded compute power to kind of do this stuff. Why is that so important? Why do we need to fully pass that and fund it?
Yeah, so look, the really good news is that it's American industries and American researchers that created this most recent surge in AI technology. It's not that long ago that we were all saying, look at China with all of its data and all of its compute, they're going to surge ahead. And so I think it's very much to American advantage that this happened in the US. But today, the people who are driving this technology are the ones who have access to massive compute in particular, but also data. And we need a broader participation in research. We need it to make sure we know how to build and test AI systems that are safe and effective and trustworthy. And then we need it for all these public purposes. And we just need a broader set of creative minds engaged in this. That is the purpose behind the National AI Research Resource, which has been recommended by a task force that was mandated by Congress. There's legislation on the Hill to get it going. And while all of that machinery is going on, the National Science Foundation, which will be running this, has started a pilot. And I'm really encouraged by the participation from lots of companies who are stepping up to provide resources for that. So watch this space, but I think there's some very good new research that's going to kick up as we get that going.
Thank you. I wish we had more time. This is really interesting.
Thank you so much.